I'm just going to get you to read your own intro, if that's all right.
Oh, I feel like I'm being framed.
You've done real estate in London, Hong Kong, Sydney. What kind of inspired you to move from the big smokes back to New Zealand and Auckland?
I'd always thought there's a market for a buyer's agency. So I'd actually decided I am going to move back to New Zealand and I am going to set up this buyer's agency. We are purely representing, rewarded by, and in working in the best interest of our buyer client.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Blueprint Podcast. I'm very stoked to be joined with my co-host, Roy, and very lucky to have Alex Martelli here on the podcast as well.
Much. Thank you.
Alex, I've had such a long day. My throat is just done after so many phone calls with clients.
Of course.
I'm just going to get you to read your own intro, if that's all right.
Oh.
So we've pre-recorded that.
I feel like I'm being framed. Today we're joined by someone who knows the buying game inside and out, Alex Martelli from Martelli Buyers Agents. Alex has built a reputation for going beyond the brief to secure dream properties, negotiate sharp deals, and advocate fiercely for her clients. Thank you. Whether they're first-timers or seasoned investors, we'll be diving into what buyers agents really do, how they can save you money, and some real-world stories from Alex's time in the trenches of the property market. I like it.
Really.
That is good.
Thanks, Alex. Well, that was a hell of an introduction, and I'm excited to converse now.
Excellent.
We've done a little bit of research on you, and you're a little bit of a globetrotter, you could say, or a woman of the world. You've done real estate in London, Hong Kong, Sydney, and you've come back to your roots, small town Auckland, New Zealand. What kind of inspired you to, move from the big smokes where you've been around the world back to New Zealand and Auckland?
Yeah, good question. I had been debating what to do towards the end of 2021. I was living in the UK and we were coming out of COVID by that point, and I had wanted to spend some time back in New Zealand with family because I'd been away for 11 years, and I sort of got stuck slightly because you couldn't leave the country, right? Once you were out, it was hard to get back in. And I was just down visiting, but I also thought it is about time I came back to New Zealand. I want to spend time with family, as many New Zealanders do. And I thought for all the years I'd been abroad, I'd always returned to New Zealand every year for holidays, and I'd always thought there's a market for a buyer's agency. So I'd actually decided I am going to move back to New Zealand and I am going to set up this buyer's agency. And I did a bit of work for Colliers when I got back, which was really good. It got my feet back under a desk, made me familiar with the lay of the land again and doing some consulting work. But I'd always thought I'm going to set up this buyer's agency. So it was tough leaving, those cities. They're fantastic places, but Auckland has also been a wonderful place to return to. If you can balance the lifestyle, and it gives you such a good environment to grow and build a business from, once you get through a bit of regulation and what you need to do, but actually it's a really supportive, nurturing place for a business startup. So the environment was also a big factor in my decision to come back.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
And I suppose leading into that, like what you've done starting up on the buyer side, we've always discussed with your positioning, like it's so unique to our country, but overseas, obviously you'd seen it been done quite successfully. So I suppose sort of breaking the mold here and leaning into on the buyer side, what were the initial sort of challenges you faced? Because it's not as prolific here. Like we're telling our producer, Jackie, and she's like, I didn't even know there were buyers agents in New Zealand. So
yeah, so the first challenge was culture. It was overcoming and educating the market. So if you're the first person truly educating the market on a service, it's tough. You have to get out. And I went out and spoke to the heads of all the big agencies and told them what I wanted to do. And I got all sorts of feedback as to, well, that won't work or that will work really well. Some people were familiar with it, as you say, from overseas. Yeah. So they actually knew the concept from having worked and lived overseas, or they'd seen TV shows and they had a bit of an idea of the glamorous side of it. It's more like location than selling sunset. It's you're grinding out deals. You have to learn the market and learn the agents and know how to negotiate. It's not just looking at beautiful houses. So there was the culture, overcoming that psyche of we don't do it that way, and trying to instead encourage the culture that New Zealand should be and has been famous for, which is, get out there, try something new, entrepreneurship, enterprise. And a lot of people will support you actually when you're setting up a new business as well. The second challenge was regulatory, because our laws are set up in the way that the Real Estate Agents Act works, which I have to fall under because we're involved in real estate work
Right.
is that it's very much around the selling process. So there is a fiduciary responsibility to the vendor and a duty of care to the buyer. And I'm, of course, looking to reverse that. And typically we're dealing with a sales agent who's representing the interests of the vendor. So we have the fiduciary responsibility to the buyer. So being able to speak to the real estate authority and go, well, what does that actually look like? And they said, well, currently real estate agents will work as a buyer's agent. I said, no, they don't. Currently, there are sales agents who act as a buyer's agent, but they're ultimately still rewarded by the sales agent through a fee split.
Yes.
And there are all sorts of requirements back to the vendor's representative when you are doing that. And I think a lot of people don't actually understand that. So we are purely representing, rewarded by, and in working in the best interest of our buyer client. So speaking to the real estate authority and being able to say, look, how are we going to switch it when even things like under the rules it says in your agreement you must state how you're going to market the property. Well, we don't market property. So I can't follow that rule. That doesn't apply. So as a result, I ended up having to spend quite a lot of money getting my own legal documents drafted that we could then use and say, make sure the real estate authority are happy with them and say, okay, well, this is how we are going to represent the best interests of buyers. So you're having to create some framework for that I thought was more robust than what a lot of agents were doing, because there's a lot of sales agents who I know will charge a buyer and they charge a small fee and they've kind of got like a one-page form that you fill in. Well, for me, that's not a robust agency agreement. I don't think it actually represents the best interests of the buyers either.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if there is a agent who's doing some buyer work, not formally as a buyer's agent, you're exactly right. They are indirectly representing the vendor because that's who's remunerating them, right? Whereas working with someone like yourself, you completely remove that conflict of interest, which is super important that people need to understand that, because often they think, oh, this agent's working with me, he's on my team, but it's not really like that.
100%. And it's interesting here in New Zealand, the agents can actually promote themselves as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
They're not. But I'll even see adverts on Seek where they say, oh, successful real estate team are seeking a buyer's agent. It's misleading the way that they're marketing it.
Very concerning, that.
Yeah, interesting. We're already kind of getting into it. And I guess breaking down some of what you do, because when we think about buying property in New Zealand, the status quo, as we've spoken about, is agents are real estate agents or listing agents, the selling agents. You're on the complete other side of it. Some people listening will be a bit like, WTF as a buyer's agent. So I guess, what are some of the key differences? Like, how do your roles differ?
I think with a sales agent, their role is obviously representing the vendor and representing a property. So they do a huge amount of their work is marketing. So they are telling you this is a beautiful home. It's just had a renovation. It's in a great school zone. So it's all about marketing the home. We don't do any marketing. Our job is we work with a buyer and we will say, okay, what is your brief? Is it attainable? What's important to you? What's really important in this property? And then we go out and find those properties. So we look at everything. We're finding properties pre-market, off-market, on the market. The biggest thing is saying to someone, we've studied this home, we've looked into it, we believe it to be a good home. We're bringing in all the consultants that we can to give advice on that as well. And then understanding what's the accurate value for the property as well, because sales agent obviously is trying to get the best outcome for their vendor. We're trying to get the best outcome for our buyer. And a lot of that's based in data. Being able to go and look at a property and go, well, I know what that one's sold for, and I went through that one, and actually that one's got, mold downstairs. There's a lot of power in having quite a lot of market knowledge, and also being able to say, okay, well, I understand what the agent's promoting and telling you, but actually the property's already been listed 3 times in the last year. So in fact, we know that the vendor's expectations are too high. So trying to get a lot of information to help support your negotiation strategy or your purchasing strategy. And then seeing that process right through from initial brief, sourcing the home, due diligence on the home, securing the home. Are we going to bring the auction forward, or actually should we let it run? If it's in a tender process, how do we make the terms as appealing as possible without, having to expose all of our financial position, through to bringing in your consultants and then the pre-settlement and the settlement process as well. So it's holding the hand of the buyer through that entire journey. A lot of people have assumed, it must be for the uber wealthy, or it must only be first-time buyers. It covers the full spectrum of buyers, which is what always surprises people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exactly my next point.
Oh,
so I
good.
was going to say is when I first became aware of your services, I was assuming that it was reserved for the ultra wealthy, and that a buyer's agent is a nice to have rather than something that should be part of your real estate journey. But you've touched on some really good points, which I'd like you to speak to, which is that it's not just for high net worth individuals, it's for your standard first home buyers, because even things like that, that point you just made, exposing your full financial position. Like I've been involved, even myself when I was a first time buyer, as soon as you get a whiff of competition, you're so quick to let them know exactly what your true budget is.
Yeah.
And then the vendor agent, the listing agent can take advantage of that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
FOMO is real.
FOMO is so intense. And I mean, speaking from someone who's been going through property negotiations right now, the minute you can, show there's competition as a buyer, you react emotionally. And someone like yourself, I mean, that's such an important piece to have to actually cool it down.
Yeah. We've had a few inquiries where people have said, look, can you please represent me, because confidentiality and privacy is very important to a number of our clients. But they said, we've been looking, and because we were naive at the start, we told all the agents what our maximum budget was. And now we feel like they know that information and they're holding on to it. We don't want it used against us, which I can understand, because also if you don't feel confident that you really know the value of a property, especially depending on what's happening in the market at that point in time, you can feel like the agent's just going to go, we'll go to your maximum budget, but the property may not be worth the maximum budget. Often people come to us, they go, that's our maximum. Very rarely do we end up going to the maximum. Often you can find something that's below the budget. So people worry that they've exposed themselves too much and given away too much information. I think most buyers are scared they're going to make a mistake. They're scared they're going to make a really expensive mistake, whether it's that they overpay for the property or they're so busy, they've got other things going on, they miss something in the due diligence.
Right. Yep.
Majority of our clients are, in fact, all of our clients are people who are, I want to say time efficient. They're time poor, but they're people who say, look, my time is better spent doing other things, and finding a home is a full-time job. It's a huge amount of work. Hence why we have a business that looks for homes 7 days a week. Yeah. We keep a very small number of clients because we have to. So, it's not. I remember when I started the business, people go, oh, it's like a property concierge. I said, no, it's not a property concierge. We don't go to a client and go, ooh, look at this one or this one. We've already gone out and looked at them and said, hey, look at that one. We really like that, and get rid of all of these because we've dismissed them for XYZ reason. Yeah. In terms of the buyers, last year, 50% of our transactions were first-time buyers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good stat. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's a really good
stat. So huge number of first-time buyers. And they say, look, I'm unfamiliar with the process. I don't understand the paperwork. I don't want to get ripped off. The two of us or one of us, whoever it is, we're working really, really hard. Yeah. We have such a cross-section of buyers. And when you say first-time buyer, we've had first-time buyers who are in their 60s because they've been overseas, they've come back to New Zealand, and this is the first time they've bought in New Zealand. We've had singles, we've had couples. We've seen a real increase in women buying on their own. Really good decision makers, really sharp, like very, very quick to say, I take your advice, let's get on with it. They're really, really good.
Yeah, fantastic.
And then a lot of Kiwis who are based overseas wanting to buy in. So we would turn them an investor, but really they're young New Zealanders doing really well up in the US or the UK or Australia. And they say, look, I've worked really hard. I've got this deposit. Can you please help me find a nice little unit? And
Set me up when I come on.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Do you, Alex, working for buyers, and you've probably got a large network of real estate agents, at least you certainly have to go into plenty of negotiations. And do you ever get in situations where you're almost locking horns or you have to fight hard? And do you have any negotiation tactics or methods that you use to win for your clients?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Silence is a wonderful thing. I often find if you just go really quiet, people will tend to talk. Yeah. You fill the room with silence, people will tell you quite a lot. Yes, you do end up locking horns with some agents, but for the most part, and I think what's been lovely over the last couple of years is we've got to know the agents really well, and they understand we're bringing them qualified buyers, which tends to make the deal a lot more efficient. And because we're coming generally with market knowledge, and I feel sorry for agents, buyers can waste a huge amount of time for them. So the upside for us is that they know, okay, Alex and Karen have got qualified buyers. They've reviewed this property. They've done their research on it. So if they come to us with an offer, chances are they've already researched it. They've got the data, and this is why they believe it's a good offer and good terms. So I find, and increasingly, it's almost like a commercial transaction that you've got a representative for the seller, a representative for the buyer, and you can come to a middle ground on terms a lot faster.
Yeah.
And again, that's just market knowledge and building relationships with the agents. But there's been a few.
A few prickly situations.
And when you say silence, do you mean like just not responding to the...
Sometimes. Yep. You just leave it and then...
sit there for a bit.
Exactly. And just listening to what people are really saying.
Yeah.
People will tell you a lot in what they're saying, and then you read into it accordingly. But there's a few tricks of the trade, and certainly on the sales agent side, but a lot of them also, they just want to get the deal done. They want, if you've got a good buyer, they want to close the deal. They want to do the best thing by their vendor as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those sort of, extra bits and pieces that you'd pick up from reading into those comments. As a first-time buyer, you'll just never be able to read that because you're thinking about so much.
Yeah.
Just for context, for any listeners who are listening to this in the future, we're in May 2025. And, in this last quarter, we've had a record amount of stock in Auckland. Yeah. There's an incredible amount of properties on the market, but with our pre-approved buyers, a lot of them actually saying to us, look, we know there's heaps on, but we're still not finding opportunities that are suitable for what we need.
Yeah.
And so I want to get your thoughts on that, but also want to talk about off-market opportunities. Like, is that something that sometimes comes across your desk, like someone who in your network says, hey, I'm looking to sell, but don't want to go through the process?
Okay, I'll cover the first one in terms of the current market. There is a huge amount of stock on the market, and record levels. And part of that we've seen is obviously so much new build stock now coming to market, and that's a mixed bag. We see some good quality new build homes, and we see some really poorly built stuff as well. And that's sitting. It's sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting.
Are we going to name and shame developers or what? not on this podcast. Yeah.
Not on this one.
Yeah.
No, it's. To be fair, some of the really reputable developers, there's a reason they've got a good reputation.
For sure.
And they have the warranties in place. But
10-year master builder.
Precisely. Yeah. What I find scary with the new builds is how many people just assume there's a 10-year warranty in place. A lot of them don't. You need to do your due diligence on these new builds. What's happening with the drainage? How many if you think about some of those sites that have been taken and say you had 1,000 square meters and now there's 6 little townhouses on it, all that pressure on the infrastructure, not only have you covered a lot of the land with concrete and put little patches of grass, and they always put gristolinas, those little bushes at the end of it, they're all them the same. But, there's a lot of pressure now on the services under that site.
Yeah.
And I've been to properties where I look at it and they've just finished it, and after a heavy downpour, you go, the water is just sitting, what's actually going to happen there? So,
and that's a risk for the neighbours as well.
It is, spot on. Yeah. It's a real risk. So, and it's not to put people off new builds. We've bought new builds, but funnily enough, I find that they can take just as much, if not more, due diligence than buying an existing property.
Absolutely.
So you've got a lot of new build stock, a lot of people, it's the Kiwi thing, they all go, we're going to sell in the summer. Everyone wants to do the work on the house over Christmas, summer, and then they want to launch in February and March. But you've just seen this huge push into selling. Yeah. I think one of the other things, the healthy homes regulations coming through July 1st.
Yes.
A lot of people are going, I'd actually rather shift it. And the other one is a lot of people are, still moving, a lot of people leaving Auckland, whether it's to move across the country or move out of the country as well. So I deal with a lot of agents who are going, the vendor's moving down south, or the vendor's moving. Yeah, precisely. So it seems to be a combination of factors. To your point, where the buyers say we still can't find anything, you have to do a lot of filtering. Having that many options, if you think about how much due diligence we have to do on every property, there's so much filtering to go through all of that stock to find a real gem. So yes, it's a good time to buy if you can find the property.
Absolutely.
Yeah. On your second point about off markets, they're an interesting proposition.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I said to Dan, I was like, how do you find properties off market? It sounds like almost mafia, sort of black market type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so an interesting stat. In November, 80% of the properties we bought were off market. Now that was an unusual month where it's not usually.
Is that true?
Mm-hmm. It's not usually that high. And, well, this is the beautiful thing of statistics. To clarify, 4 of the 5 homes we bought in November were off market. So it's 80%. And they were all unique in that, one, the wife was ill. They just weren't ready to have open homes. That wasn't what they wanted. Another one was a divorce. Another one was a divorce. Another one was a very high-end property. They just didn't want people coming through their home. They were
for a nosy.
Yeah, they just said, look, we're very happy to do a quiet deal. Interesting, in that case, my buyers had sold their home off market. We purchased this home off market, and the vendors of that property purchased another home off market. So you had 3 off market transactions. Yeah. So
how do you find these deals?
Speaking to a lot of real estate agents, lots of agents. We are contacted on occasion from time to time by vendors who say, would you buy my home direct? It's something we try to discourage. We prefer that vendors do go through a sales agent, because while I'm saying buyers, you should have a buyer's agent in your best interests, I'd like the vendors to have someone representing their best interests as well. So, there's a lot of really good agents out there. So we'll just say, look, go and find your own agent, or we can give you a few recommendations. We're not getting involved. We don't take any referral fees. We're not going to do any of that. But, have your own representation and we can have ours. But on occasion, a vendor will go, nope, I've gone out. I understand the value. We've always got a private valuation in those cases as well. Really important that everyone knows the value of the property. Off-market deals are people who, once upon a time, it was, yes, you can buy my home, but you have to pay me triple what I think it's worth. What we tend to see from the off markets now is the privacy, confidentiality, change of personal circumstances. And then also people who just go, okay, I've watched the market. I can see what's happening. I've got a pretty good feel for what it's worth. I don't need to test it, because yes, I could go to the market and I could test it and I might end up 10,000 off and I'm better off. I might be 10,000 down for the sake of doing this deal now.
Yes.
I'd rather just sell quietly.
Yeah. And all those examples you had is personal circumstances, right? And in every market, up or down, or whatever time of year, things change, right? And people need to take action. So it's good that you're there for that.
For sure. I've got a question. Perhaps it's a little bit more generally speaking, but you certainly sound like you really know your stuff, which is great. And I love your like entrepreneurial spirit, coming back to New Zealand. You've seen this market work overseas. You're making it now work in New Zealand. Do you see the space evolving and growing? Is it sort of becoming accepted? And could this be quite normal as we move forward?
I think it will. I think it will grow. And what it will be is that a group of people like myself will come together and say, we want to represent buyers. We really enjoy that side of the transaction. I saw it grow in Australia. It's a truly well-established model up in the UK and over in the US. So no, I think more people will enter the market and want to set up a buyer's agency. There are a few hurdles to overcome at the start, as we've all been through. It's quite a different process and way of thinking to being a sales agent. So just seeing my colleague Karen, who had been in sales, and I pursued her because I knew she'd be perfect for the role. And I remember a few months into it, she goes, gosh, it's so different to selling real estate. I said, oh no, that's a very different way of looking at it. It involves a lot of empathy, understanding the buyer. And again, it's that due diligence piece and studying properties and finding opportunities, but it's not marketing. It's completely different to that. So yes, I think more people will enter the market, and I think it will become a norm, and I embrace it. The more people who enter into it, and so long as they keep really high standards, so it's probably the thing that worries me a bit, but so long as people keep high standards and they're giving a really good level of service, then it's something that more people will get familiar with and say, I want a buyer's agent representing my best interest in being in my corner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting now. Like, I wonder if it'll be initially more people doing sort of what you've done, people that have seen it, been exposed to it overseas, as opposed to it coming
organically, naturally. I think what needed to happen, because there have been a few people who had tried to set up buyers agencies previously, but again, it was more the selling sunset approach. Yeah. And I think it was just, you get some experience overseas, you learn the processes, you overcome the hurdles here in New Zealand, and then, you can get started and get moving. But there's a couple of buyers agents down in Queenstown, Arrowtown. I was recently contacted by a group in the Hawke's Bay who have set up a buyers agency. So you're starting to see more of these little individual agencies pick up and go, you know what? We're going to really get to know the market. I look at something like the Hawke's Bay, and credit to the ladies who are setting up there. That's a perfect market to have a buyer's agency, because if I was looking to buy in the Hawke's Bay, I'd go, well, we know about the flooding and we know there's been a couple of issues, but we also know it's a tourism hotspot and there's beautiful wine down there. It would be great to have someone on the ground who goes, yep, we've studied this property and this is a good one, and we're going to help you secure it, because I don't know that landscape at all. I don't know the values down there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
good on you, girls.
No, good on them. And
totally.
I think just seeing an industry grow is so important. Like you mentioned, just the high standards staying there, which I'm sure they will. Like in the advisor industry, one of my favorite pastimes is there's a Facebook group, Kiwi First Home Buyers.
Oh, God, I follow that.
You've probably been in there.
Yes.
Amazing page to hang out.
Oh, there's some scary stuff in there.
There's some scary stuff, but it's a very pro-mortgage advisor group, which I'm very, very happy to see, because you don't see fellow mortgage advisors as competition in that sense, because there's 40,000 people in the audience who are now seeing the true benefits of having an advisor.
100%.
Not even that specific person, but just one in general to guide you through the process. So the same way you're a property advisor, guiding people through the process. I'm going to steal Rory's question, but it's about something maybe a bit controversial. The A word. Auctions.
Oh, yeah.
The A word.
I was hoping something more controversial.
No,
yeah. Oh, hang on a minute.
This is controversial for us. It's a very vanilla show. But this is something I love talking about, because I love the auction environment, but not if I'm a registered bidder.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I can
that's
get
heart
nervous.
palpitation stuff, isn't
Heart palpitations. I know sometimes I've seen clients get very good deals at auctions, but I suppose it's a case-by-case thing and how you navigate this if a property is being sold method of sales auction and your client is interested.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
You've got to know the value of the property. So that going in and saying, that's what the property's worth. And we always say to our buyers, and this applies not just to our clients, we're increasingly getting people just ring us saying, look, I found a home, I've done all my due diligence, but I'm terrified of bidding. Can you just go and bid for me? And we sit down with them and go, okay, you got 3 figures. What's your idea, the dream price, right? That would be lovely. What's the maximum price? And they give you a number and you go, yeah. Okay. And what's the figure that if it sold for $1 more, you'd let it go? And that's always different to what their maximum budget was going to be. Because when people are really pushed, they go, actually, that's what's important to me. Yeah. For our clients who we've been working with, we say, look, we've been out and studied the property. This is the range in which we think you should buy it, because if it gets up at this point, we'll walk away. We'll go out and buy something else, because auctions are all about emotion.
That's right.
And so people go in. I'm amazed by how many people go into an auction with no strategy. They go in or they just go way past their budget. I was in an auction recently. It was really sad. There was a couple sitting behind me and she was crying as they reached a point, and he saw her, the husband was looking, and you could tell that he obviously felt awful. So he kept bidding because he realized that she desperately wanted the house, but she kept crying, I suspect, because she was thinking, we haven't got the money to buy this house. And I'm watching, I thought, it's just awful.
Yeah.
And the terrible thing
it's so in the moment as well.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And the regrets, the buyers regret afterwards.
It's so painful.
Yeah. And that's why I say, and I'm giving advice to the screen here, if you're going in to bid, have a strategy and say, that's the dollar where we cap out and we're comfortable to do that.
Yeah.
Don't go home and have regrets.
Yeah.
So, but don't go into the auction going, we'll just see how things go and we want to bid to about this point. It's a risky thing to do. And the hard thing with an auction, there's one winner. Everyone else loses. There's no second place in an auction. So you need to be prepared for that and say, we have decided, we've agreed, we're going to bid to that point. All the auctioneers are going to be like, shut up, Alex, stop saying that. But, that is the truth, that go in and have what your budget is going to be, because you don't know what's going to happen in the room. And the other bit of advice I've got for people is, if you miss out on a property, if you miss the auction, don't beat yourself up going, we missed it by $5,000. You didn't miss it by $5,000. You missed it by $5,000 below what the other buyer was willing to go to at that point. For all you know, they would have kept climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. So you haven't necessarily missed the home by what you think you have. You've just decided, I'm out. I'm calling it.
Totally. I've heard you say elsewhere, Alex, a strategy of yours is pulling the auction early.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? Can you explain that?
So if you find a good home, and you've got a pretty good view as to what it's worth, you're really comfortable with it, you can put a pre-auction offer forward. Now, the interesting thing, and it's such a balance, because a pre-auction offer, you have to know, why are people thinking it's going to sell at X price? What's being promoted to them? Why do they think it's going to sell at a certain value? What value do you actually think it's going to sell for? And if you can do your due diligence, you get your building inspector and get the legal review, get any other consultants in. If you can move at a good pace and you feel that you've really ticked everything off, you put forward a pre-auction offer. But it's a fine line, because it has to be an offer that makes the vendor go, I'm going to take this offer, I'm accepting it. And if someone else turns up in the room, that's fantastic. Typically, I do it where you see, if you go into a property and there's 120 sets of shoes out front, well, people are thinking it's going to sit in a certain price point, and you already know that's not accurate. It's going to sell. What's likely to sell above that price point.
That's right.
You don't see too many of them at the moment because it is such a saturated market and buyers are all over the place. And there's a lot of buyer nervousness. We're talking to a lot of people who go, I don't want to spend all my budget because I'm worried about job security this year. I'm worried about the economy. Like when I lived in Sydney years ago, it was such a hot market. Everything you did is a pre-auction offer because you were just trying to jump in the ladder before it took off even further. And everything was selling under the hammer in Sydney. This was back in 2012, 13, 14. The market was just going crazy.
Another hot market, eh?
Really hot market. But if you've done your due diligence, and you think, well, I want to get ahead of the competition, I want to get ahead of everyone else doing their DD, then you can bring the auction forward. It very much depends on what's happening with the property and how confident you are in that price point. To give you a very quick example, property I was looking at recently, people had assumed it was going to sell in the 900s, and there's a couple of reasons as to why they thought it was going to sell in the 900s. I had appraised it 1.25 to 135 because I just know that market. I know how those sort of homes. They had a lot of registered bidders on the day, and all those people gone out and done all their due diligence. It sold for 1.3.
Oh, wow.
Interestingly, the opening bid was in the late 900s, immediately knocked 5 of the bidders out. So, and that just shows how many people didn't actually understand the value of the home.
But do you think that perhaps they were misled by the listing agent not to...
I dare not say that. I think they obtained information that they probably... That's in fact, that is spot on. People, they hear what they want to hear. And I think also people assume that everything's at a bargain at the moment. It's not. Good homes will sell for a very fair price at the moment. True. They're not all made equally. Good homes are still getting a good price.
It's true. And just before we move on, one point I really want to reiterate around, we said buyers' nervousness. I've noticed from my side is that people are just so terrified of overpaying, like we were discussing before, because of the changes that have happened in this market, and looking back 3 years ago, because everybody knows someone who's in an awkward position because they bought at the peak of the market and now they're struggling to refinance or B, move on, know? So I think that almost because that's so recent, that adds to that nervousness and uncertainty of those environments and auctions.
Yeah, you're spot on. And to add one to that is our reliance on CVs. I get so many people, they contact me, they go, we want to buy something, but we want it to be 20% below CV. I said, that's not how it works. There's still plenty of properties selling above CV and selling way below CV. But people are trying to gauge the value off that, as well as what you say, the fear of overpaying and seeing what's happened and now having too much stock. So a lot of people, I think, are feeling very stuck.
Yeah, that's right.
I suppose we've just been talking about the market. So as a sort of final wrap up before we get into some more fun questions, although this is very fun actually. What you're doing. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You can edit that.
This is where the long division is going to come out.
This is really this conversation actually. Where do you see the market going, just in generally over the next 12 months and perhaps beyond?
I think, I know there's a lot of people saying, interest rates will be cut and then the market will take off. I still think the factors of the uncertainty for people, and there is a bit of movement still in and out of the country. I think personally the values will probably stay relatively flat, just while there's still so much supply of property. I think vendors will adjust in their values and their views of what their home is worth, which will be hard for some, but also palatable for others. As I say, good homes are still selling for a good price anyway.
That's right.
So I don't see the market suddenly racing off the way it has previously. And I think, again, people will they'll hold out, they'll do their research, they'll look for good homes, and it'll get there. But I don't see any great massive jumps up and down and sideways.
A bit of a plateau for a period of time is not a bad thing, eh?
Which is nice. Yeah. I think as a person in the industry, it's nice to operate in a pretty stable environment. It's very nice for us because obviously comparing to a hot market where you're pre-approved buyers or under so much stress and there's always time, urgency to get ready for an auction. It's nice for them to have a bit of choice and get properties under contract, do the due diligence and feel a lot more positive and less stressed about the whole buying process. Yeah, but no, very well said. We're going to dip into our favorite part of the podcast. So we just wanted the listeners to know a bit more about you, Alex.
Oh.
So yeah, this is actually not property. Maybe a couple property questions, but Rory, take it away.
Okay, question number one. So after a hard day, you've been butting heads with real estate agents and just grinding out your due diligence. You come home and there's a lovely home-cooked meal. What cuisine is it?
Oh, if it's been cooked by my partner, it's a steak. If it was me, I mean, half the nights you get in so late, it's scrambled egg on toast.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I am a huge fan of, there's a chef, Ottolenghi, and he is a Israeli chef based in London, and he does amazing things with vegetables, with fruit, with all sorts. He does beautiful, beautiful food. So,
oh wow,
yeah, bit of Mediterranean, I think.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Gotta check that out.
Yep.
And then we're going to put a record on.
Yep.
What sort of genre are we listening to while we enjoy this Mediterranean?
I listen to all sorts. In fact, at Pub Quiz, my designated category is music and cinema. So,
cool.
I would say there's probably a bit of blues.
Nice.
Yeah, big fan
classic.
of blues, and probably a bit of I'm a sucker for 80s music as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Nice.
We ask all our guests this question, but I already know what you're going to say. But for context, we get a lot of business people, a lot of people in real estate who come as guests. So property flipping or long-term property holding? What's your preference?
Long-term property holding.
All about long-term?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Buy land, they're not making more of it, as they say.
That's
true.
I
just think property flipping is, I mean, I know plenty of people do it, but I've always thought you're better to buy something good and hold it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We 100% agree. Protect your money from inflation.
Now, let's go back to you starting Martelli & Co.
Mm-hmm.
What piece of advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
Damn good question.
Really good question. I would say be patient, be a bit kind on yourself. You don't have to do everything perfectly at the start. You're trying to do so many things. You're trying to be all the things all at once. For example, it's been 2 years on and we don't do anything on Instagram and Facebook because most of our social media per se we've done via LinkedIn because that is typically our audience. At the start, I would have said, we need to be on all the platforms. We need to promote this and that. There just isn't the time. You don't have the ability to be all things to all people, and cover all the platforms. So probably the best thing I did at the start is I said, what are our core competencies? And we're going to focus on those and drill in on those and just skip out everything else. So I think I would, at the start, I'd be like, just be kind on yourself at all good things in time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Well said.
Thank you.
Stepping into our shoes for the next OCR review, do you think we're going to get a cut? Do you think we're going to get an increase? Do you think it's going to stay the same?
I think there'll be a cut.
Do you think there'll be a cut?
I reckon.
Yeah.
Yep. I think they'll want to stimulate and, that's their call, but I think there'll be a cut.
I agree. I think everything outside of our industry as well is still hurting and we're not seeing the growth we need. So I agree. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining Rory and I.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And we really, value what you do for the buyers in New Zealand.
So much. Appreciate it. Appreciate what you guys do for the buyers as well. We, the partnership we have with financial advisors is absolutely critical, and it's a journey together.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alex.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.